everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. It's a very exciting time of year for all of us. It's BlizzCon 2018, and for the World of Warcraft players, while there is a lot of other stuff to talk about, a lot of other things to cover, I think one main thing is getting the center stage, and that is the Lost Honor cinematic, because that shows us some extremely cool moments. It bridges a gap between 8.0 and 8.1, and more importantly, it is teasing a lot of extremely interesting things with the future of the game. I'm almost thinking a temporary third faction. Now, I mean temporary third faction in the way that way back in Siege of Orgrimmar, technically there was two factions of Horde plus the Alliance, although with some of the very recent changes that Blizzard made on the PTR, we actually could see Horde players siding against each other, and that is fairly interesting given what this cinematic covers. So, let's get into it. Lost Honor takes place after the Battle for Lordaeron, presumably sometime during 8.0, while all of, the player characters are on Kulturas with Jaina, I suppose, because this is from the Alliance perspective. And back in Stormwind, Anduin's ruling. He's looking around, he's seeing all the soldiers coming back from the war, he's thinking about what's going on, and he goes to meet his prisoner in the Stockades. Now, of course, in the Battle for Lordaeron, Saurfang really was pretty much done. What had happened to him is that his morals, his codes of honor were being tested and tested and tested. Now, Blizzard didn't really do it too deftly with Teldrassil and Lordaeron. Sylvanas was, she's not exactly subtle, let's put it that way. And really, for Saurfang, that was a big problem. He slowly saw his honor being tested, and then it got to the point where she was using Blight even against her own soldiers, raising her own soldiers. Of course, that's something that happened to Saurfang's son. Then Sylvanas taunted him about that. She really was a bit of a nasty piece of work towards him. So Saurfang was completely, really turned against Sylvanas and this modern version of the Horde. So Anduin goes to the Stockades to talk to Saurfang to find out what is up, and that's where things get kind of interesting, because Anduin is wondering, why didn't you kill me? And Saurfang pretty much says that the only thing he really cares about is the Horde, his ideals of the Horde that he's fought for his whole life after they all redeemed themselves from their whole demonic kerfuffle that they had to deal with for a while. And he sees Sylvanas as being the main danger, the main threat to this, the main problem, and essentially destroying everything that he loves, because I'm pretty sure his wife is dead, his son is dead, he really doesn't have a lot left in the world. So he lays it all out to Anduin, says, look, Sylvanas is destroying the Horde, and the reason why I didn't kill you was because I think you're the best chance at stopping Sylvanas. Now, that's kind of interesting because Anduin is a character that really, he would have time for anyone. But not Sylvanas, not anymore. Of course, as we saw in Before the Storm, that's essentially where Anduin decides there's no hope for her. She has to be gotten rid of. She's just beyond the pale. Now, it's not like Saurfang literally knows this, but that's the setup of our character. So, Saurfang acknowledges that Anduin is essentially the best hope of removing Sylvanas. And I'm assuming that Saurfang understands that Anduin does know that there's an honorable core to the Horde, because, if Saurfang was to sort of side with Anduin and then Anduin was to completely wipe out the Horde, obviously, Saurfang would be in a pretty bad situation. So he does seem to at least be assuming that Anduin is not going to try to take over the whole continent. He pretty much just wants the current bad situation to end. So, in light of all this, Anduin pretty much says he doesn't think he can destroy her. And it seems to be that his perspective in this is that she is so very evil and so prepared to do absolutely anything to win that there's no way that he can end up being victorious while still sort of preserving what he sees as being the moral, honorable core of the Alliance. So I think symbolically what Blizzard are trying to say here is that when the Alliance and the true Horde, the honorable Horde, get together, then that's kind of when the good-spirited people can defeat the big baddies, in this case, Sylvanas. And it is interesting because Sylvanas very much is being set up as no longer really being a player ally character. Now, that is kind of interesting because of what then happens in the patch 8.1 PTR. So what you end up seeing in this is, of course, Anduin leaves the door open. Saurfang then we assume, leaves, it seems like they have a gentleman's agreement about what's going to happen next, but they haven't actually made a plan. Now, Saurfang ends up escaping towards towards the Swamp of Sorrows in the patch 8.1 PTR, and that's where the Horde questline happens. Now, previously, this was a lot less interesting because what happened is essentially you and Zelkan were sent there along with some Dark Rangers. The whole goal was to hunt down Saurfang, and you have no choice but to help Saurfang eventually kill the Dark Rangers. Well, a lot of players, myself included, sort of said to Blizzard, look, I get what you're going for here. I get where, narratively you think the players are emotionally, but it's an MMO. Player choice should be a thing. And that's where it gets very interesting, because on the PTR, they updated it such that the player does have a choice. You can pretty much say, buzz off Zelkan, I'm going back, and you can essentially rat him out to Sylvanas and side with her, which makes sense because shortly after you then go and do her dirty work in the Darkshore Warfront. Well, that's fairly interesting because that now means that Horde players are... They're really going to be enemies in a way, because you have some Horde players who are helping Saurfang, you've got some Horde players who are not choosing to help him, and that is in many ways the closest we have ever had to there being 3 factions. Now, I don't mean literally 3 factions in-game, but I want you to think back to the Siege of Orgrimmar. Because in the Siege of Orgrimmar, there technically were 3 factions. There was Garrosh's Horde, there was Thrall and Vol'jin's Horde, and then there was the Alliance. The only thing was that players were not a part of Garrosh's Horde. So really, there only were 2 factions. Whereas here, technically, there are, amongst the Horde player base, they're going to be split into 2 different factions. I have got to wonder if Blizzard are going to use that. It's something that they definitely have not taken into their expansion-wide plan, because what they did in the 8.1 PTR was done as a response to player feedback. And that means that I think the broad strokes direction of this expansion probably doesn't have there being 3 factions of players in mind. But what I do think might happen is that this current storyline about Saurfang, about the nature of the Horde, I think that's going to be primarily based on the war campaign, or told through the war campaign. And it seems to me pretty logical that the 8.2 war campaign is not really finished yet, and certainly the 8.3 war campaign is not finished yet either, which means that this could be the kind of the single-player storyline of this expansion. So yeah, there you go. Technically a temporary 3rd faction of players, I suppose. It will be extremely interesting to see if Blizzard really bring this into the gameplay. Maybe if they, try to let Horde players choose what side they're on. I don't know exactly how they could do that in a way that would be balanced, but if they ever did want to make that be felt in terms of gameplay outside of a rote single-player scenario, I think that would be just an opportunity to do something that's extremely interesting with this expansion, and in a way that is kind of unique to the narrative of this expansion. Now, when we talk about other things here, it also does get more interesting when we think about the 8.1 war campaign, because yes, it's got this stuff going on with, with Saurfang in the Swamp of Sorrows and that narrative choice the players have, but a lot of other stuff goes on. And the whole point of this cinematic is that, well, you could say that within the Horde, Saurfang is woke to the problem of Sylvanas, because she was taunting his son, and just the nature of the things that she was doing against him. It would have hit him emotionally before it really would have hit anyone else. I mean, look at Zelkan. He was kind of, young and idealistic, and you could say taken advantage of by the Horde war machine. Well, in the 8.1 war campaign, now this technically is getting into spoilers of future content, so of course be aware of that, but Sylvanas does some really, really questionable stuff. Now, technically, we know that, essentially the main Alliance villain of Kulturas was kind of working with Ashara. Now, that's pretty mean business, of course. Ashara is not our friend, whether you're Horde or Alliance. And, you kind of break her out of jail in the Horde war campaign. And right after you break her out of jail, Sylvanas pretty much decides that she has to meet with this character, and that's fine, but Sylvanas then abandons the player, Rexxar and Valtois, just on the island. She just abandons you, and Rexxar and Valtois are pretty much talking to each other saying, she's a problem, right? And they sort of come to the position, the two of them, that, yeah, the Horde's taking a bad direction. So it seems that by the time we hit this part of the war campaign, there's two more important, very important, I would say, Horde characters, especially a fan favorite like Rexar, who are beginning to turn against Sylvanas. And then later on, this is something that is also a pretty big spoiler, but Sylvanas goes to raise Derek Proudmoore, so Jaina's brother. And I'm assuming that's done as some sort of, assassination mission or something a little bit mean like that. But of course, she's resurrecting their dead son to go and, kill his mother, sister, and brother, which is a fairly nasty and dishonorable thing to do. And what do we see? Well, we see characters like Bane be completely disgusted by that. And when you start to look at the Horde leadership, more and more of them are turning against Sylvanas. And it really is becoming very apparent that she's out for the Forsaken only, and she keeps on talking about wanting to preserve the Horde, but really she's only trying to preserve the Horde as a means to an end. And it's becoming more and more apparent to the characters involved that that is what's going on. And you do wonder, will this lead to some sort of temporary third faction? Now, if it does, and it seems like on at least a technical level it kind of could in terms of the narrative, well, they're not going to do Siege of Orgrimmar 2, or they're probably not going to do Siege of Undercity because it's not really in a defendable state right now. And it does make you think that maybe Sylvanas will step away. Maybe she'll be driven off, something like that, and we will get a death faction. That's something that a lot of people have been talking about. We've got Kalia Menethil being a Lightforged undead. We've got all of the stuff going on. Technically, Bolvar's daughter is in the game now. There's a lot of undead-related stuff going on, and we just keep on seeing Sylvanas being pushed away from the values of the Horde. We keep on getting content like this cinematic that is hammering that point home, and when we remember that Blizzard never intended for there to be player choice with the Saurfang choice in the patch 8.1 questline, Blizzard have a very clear plan with what they want to do with Sylvanas, and I mean, personally, my view of this, and this is slightly cynical, I suppose, in nature, but, I'm thinking, if I'm a Blizzard developer and I'm trying to work out what the next 3 expansions are, given that I've just defeated the Burning Legion in my game, so I've removed my main villain, well, surely the Blizzard developers are wondering what's the next big villain going to be. And there are so many hints about death being, well, just there being more there than you would otherwise think, and I've talked about that before in the channel. So that's really what the third faction stuff sort of seems like it's going to end up being to me, where there will be disagreement amongst Horde players, and then the Horde will refocus. It will probably end up being remade around that honorable core of characters like Thrall, like Saurfang, like Vol'jin. Maybe then Horde players will just get something they can rally behind and not feel bad or confused about it, and maybe Sylvanas will pretty much no longer be a player-facing character in the way that she is now. Maybe she will be more of a figurehead character like the Lich King, who represents something bigger in the Warcraft universe. So there you go. That is my take of the Lost Honor cinematic. Really cool, and it's a part of an initiative within Blizzard with these cinematics that I really like. They are doing more of them. Of course, the more the merrier with these Blizzard cinematics. They really are quite nice. But more importantly to me, Blizzard are beginning to get confident enough in their storytelling to do character scenes. There was no action in this. There was barely any action with Old Soldier. They're okay to just have 2 characters talking to each other and to film it cinematically, put some nice music in, and have something that's working on a level that is maybe a little bit deeper than just, swords and screaming. And that's really good to see. So, let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you think about the direction of World of Warcraft, and do stay tuned to this channel because there will be a lot more about the direction of World of Warcraft in the coming hours and days. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.